Back in the 1930s, city streets were flooded with cars hunting for fares during the Great Depression. To cut through the chaos and try to improve safety, cities stepped in and capped exactly how many taxis were legally allowed to operate. Fast forward a few decades, and that initial safety measure had mutated into a tightly controlled monopoly. In cities like New York, you needed a physical metal plate, called a medallion, to legally pick up paying riders. Because the supply was artificially capped, by 2014, a single piece of stamped metal could sell for over $1 million. The system heavily favored the people holding those licenses. Most drivers didn't actually own a medallion. They rented them from fleet investors and swallowed steep weekly fees that ate up their paychecks. Riders felt the squeeze too. Neighborhoods outside the city center were routinely ignored, waits were long, and the service was entirely cash only. Into this rigid ecosystem walked a bored 26-year-old stuck in a cubicle named Ryan Graves and an ambitious entrepreneur named Travis Kalanick. In the spring of 2010, Kalanick sent out a tweet looking to build a new startup. Graves replied, "Here's a tip, email me." Those 5 simple words birthed UberCab. Kalanick and Graves were walking unarmed into a legally fortified monopoly that had spent nearly a century building walls specifically to crush outsiders. By October 2010, local government pushed back. San Francisco regulators slammed the young startup with cease and desist letters. Because the app let users tap a button and get a car right away, without proper commercial insurance, background checks, or state licenses, the city declared UberCab an illegal, unlicensed dispatch service. The letters laid out the exact penalty for staying open. For every trip completed, the company would face $5,000 in fines. Worse, Graves, Kalanick, and employees were threatened with 90 days in jail for each day they kept the app running. Graves read the document in a panic, asking what they were supposed to do. Kalanick had a very different reaction. He told his team to drop the word cab from the name, ignore the regulators entirely, and keep the cars on the road. That single decision set a pattern for the next decade. Uber stopped acting like a traditional tech company trying to appease City Hall and adopted a highly aggressive playbook: launch first and ask for permission never. Step 1 of that playbook was systematic expansion. The company would move a team into a target city, secure office space, and launch the service completely outside the bounds of local law. The goal was to build a massive user base before regulators even knew how to react. When local police did try to enforce the rules, Uber told its drivers to ignore the warnings. Management sent emails promising drivers full reimbursement and legal help if they were ticketed or if their cars were impounded. The message was simple: keep driving. This chart shows how they categorized the cost of breaking the law. In Boston, the company paid out more than $200,000 for drivers operating without commercial licenses or registrations, quietly booking the fines as miscellaneous expenses. In Philadelphia, they entered the city illegally, racked up thousands of violations, and absorbed a multi-million-dollar penalty to keep operating. Traffic tickets and impound fees weren't treated as legal warnings. Uber treated them as a standard customer acquisition cost. They realized they possessed enough venture capital to simply exhaust the local legal system through sheer financial force. As cities realized they couldn't bankrupt the company with fines, they started conducting physical stings to catch drivers in the act. To counter this, Uber turned to its engineers, who built specialized tools to actively deceive physical law enforcement. They created a software program called Greyball. Approved by the company's legal team, it was deployed in at least 6 countries, including the Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany, with the explicit purpose of dodging regulators. The software profiled users. It checked if a rider's credit card was tied to a police credit union. It tracked the IDs of cheap burner phones, often used in stings, and it drew digital borders around government buildings. If you tried to order a ride from inside a police station, the app would show you an interface full of ghost cars that would never actually arrive. But if investigators managed to bypass Greyball and raid a local Uber office, the company had a final line of defense, a remote system nicknamed the Ripley kill switch. When a raid began, a single command from headquarters would sever the connection between local office computers and the main company servers. Screens would go dark, and investigators standing in the room were instantly blinded to the live data. By weaponizing its software to blind law enforcement, Uber moved from ignoring local regulations to active international obstruction of justice. This aggression spilled over from the digital world into physical streets. In January 2016, thousands of taxi drivers blocked roads in Paris. Tires were burned, and drivers from across Europe joined in, leading to arrests for assault and arson. When Uber executives expressed concern about the severe physical attacks on their own drivers, Kalanick sent a clear response. He stated that the conflict was marketing, telling his team that the violence guarantees success because it placed intense political pressure on local governments. At the same time, the company found a way to monetize public anxiety. Uber introduced a $1 safe rides fee, telling users the money funded background checks and driver education. In reality, former employees reported the fee was just pure margin, quietly pouring nearly $500 million straight into the company's coffers without improving actual security. The overarching strategy relied on manipulating human danger. Uber allowed its drivers to absorb the very real violence of the streets, while charging its riders for fake safety, converting both sides of the conflict into corporate growth. By 2017, the culture built to crush outside competition began tearing the company apart from the inside. The internal rot became fully public when engineer Susan Fowler published a detailed account of severe sexual harassment and retaliation at the company, closely followed by a massive intellectual property theft lawsuit from Google's self-driving unit. The early venture capital backers, led by benchmark partner Bill Gurley, realized the founder had become an active threat to the brand's survival. Gurley organized a coordinated syndicate of major shareholders, combining their voting power to push Kalanick out of the company he built. The breaking point arrived in a Chicago hotel room. 2 investors flew in and handed Kalanick a letter demanding his immediate resignation. Cornered, isolated from his allies, and threatened with a public leak to the New York Times, Kalanick signed the paper and stepped down as CEO. The outcome carried a sharp irony. Kalanick had engineered a ruthless corporate machine designed to eliminate any obstacle in its path, only to have that exact machine identify him as the final obstacle to eliminate. Ryan Graves survived the boardroom purge, but he was trapped. His vast fortune was locked in private equity that could easily go to zero if the company collapsed. He needed new management, led by incoming CEO Dara Khosrowshahi, to sanitize the operation just enough to reach an initial public offering. 2 years later, the gamble paid off. In May 2019, Uber finally went public. Graves quietly resigned from the board 2 weeks after the bell rang, instantly converting his private stock into massive liquid wealth. After taxes, he walked away with tens of millions of dollars. Today, Graves lives in Hawaii, surfing at sunrise and donating parts of his fortune to clean water charities. But behind him sits a company still battling multi-billion-dollar debt, lingering safety controversies, and thousands of drivers fighting for fair pay. Uber's playbook proved that in Silicon Valley, systemic rule-breaking is heavily rewarded. A 5-word tweet can buy an escape to a quiet island, but it leaves behind an ocean of consequences for everyone else.